My name is Elise Gerhart. I work full-time right now against the Mariner East 2 pipeline, and I live in Huntington, Pennsylvania. So the reason I got involved with this fight is because Sunoco and Energy Transfer Partners brought it literally to our doorstep, and the reason we decided to fight it was because it affects, pretty much every aspect of our lives. It affects our safety and peace of mind, and if you don't have those two things, you don't really have anything else. It's a direct threat to our watershed, our water supply, our neighbors' water supply. So, you know, we're directly impacted on the front lines here. And then also, this pipeline allows for a continuation of fracking in Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. The pipeline itself affects communities out to the west and really has a wide-scale environmental impact that way. There's already been, many water supplies destroyed by fracking. There's been a huge increase in air pollution from fracking and leaks. And, continuing to use these fossil fuels puts the climate in further peril and affects, the future of life itself on the planet. So I think it's really important that we do everything that we can to try and put a stop to it.
Right. Okay.
So last year in March 2016, Sunoco had secured the right to use eminent domain in the county court here in Huntington, and they started to move forward with tree clearing. It was incredibly preemptive at the time, considering they would not receive their permits from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection to build the pipeline until February of 2017, but they decided they were going to come in anyway. And it's my understanding that they did so in order to use my family as an example. They knew that we were putting up a great deal of resistance already, and so they came in with a lot of force, a big crew of workers with chainsaws, almost 20 police officers, and they, forcibly started to cut the trees. And I think that they did that so that they could try to intimidate other landowners who had not yet made easement agreements. They wanted to show that there was really nothing you could do to resist them. If you weren't going to agree to sign, then they would just take it anyway. And, so that was really publicized not just through us, but through them. And when they came to do that, we decided we weren't just going to stand by and let it happen. And we weren't just going to let this county court ruling infringe on our constitutional rights, our property rights, or the rights of the environment. So we decided to use direct action as a means to try and prevent the tree clearing. So we had a few people who went up into the trees on the property. We have pretty healthy, approximately 80-year-old forest here on the land, and I was sort of camped out in one of the largest white pines that was within this 3-acre easement that they wanted to clear cut. And so when they came with the chainsaws, we had people up in the trees, and that was really the only thing that prevented them from cutting down all of the trees on the easement, was that, there was literally people's lives on the line. And luckily they are not willing to go that far, I know in pipeline fights in other countries, people who go up against these type of companies do wind up being killed sometimes. So we're lucky to, at least have that privilege here in the United States. So we were able to keep them from cutting down a handful of trees, and then they kind of left, and then 11 months later got their permits for the project. And so following the example of what indigenous folks in this country are doing when it comes to pipeline fights, looking at what happened at Standing Rock, we decided to form an encampment against the pipeline. So instead of having just a few days of protest with tree sits, we decided to make it a ongoing, long-term encampment that then supports ongoing tree sits. And so right now, Sunoco Energy Transfer Partners is building the pipeline in a lot of different locations across the state and West Virginia and Ohio. And we're just here standing against them. And for the time being, they are sort of going around us. The pipeline has not been rerouted, but I think that they're not sure how they want to deal with this type of resistance. It's not something that's incredibly common for, your average, working class person or family along the route of a pipeline route to decide to use direct action to try and prevent the pipeline from coming through.
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, we're testing the waters here, and so are they. They're using legal techniques that have not really been used in eminent domain cases very often. Like last year, they made some arrests during the protest that we had, and then those cases were ultimately dropped after 8 months of going back and forth to court. And the district attorney basically said, well, we determined that these people were on private property, and therefore these charges that we put on them don't apply. And so now this year, when they're actually, more desperate to put the pipe in the ground and build the thing, they're taking these extra legal steps, like getting a writ of possession against my family and basically taking away more of our rights when it comes to that piece of property. It's still on our deed. We still pay taxes on it, but now they've used this strange legal document to say, well, now you can be charged as trespassers on that piece of property, and we will prosecute you. So that's kind of what we're facing right now. Anyone who takes action is, looking at some substantial jail time potentially and fines. What were you? What? Oh, and in addition to all that, we're being subjected to PSYOPs, basically. There's a lot of information coming out right now about the involvement of a mercenary group called Tiger Swan in the building of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is another Energy Transfer Partners project. And we have a lot of reason to believe that that mercenary group is working with Energy Transfer Partners now to surveil and harass and basically terrorize people who are taking action against the Mariner East Pipeline and other energy transfer projects. We've been experiencing a high volume of flyovers with different helicopters, being circled by planes. We've had drones come into the property and do extremely invasive flyovers, not just on the pipeline easement itself, but over our house. and, areas that should not, under any circumstances, be subject to that kind of thing. They have, Sunoco and Energy Transfer has no right to any part of the rest of our property, but they act like they do. And they act like they own the public roadways. People are being harassed driving by construction when they're in a moving vehicle on a public roadway, having obscenities yelled at them, having security guards run at the vehicle in a threatening manner. They're having vehicles parked watching our driveway pretty frequently, watching who's going in and out as if it's any of their business. This is still private property, but under this circumstance of this pipeline company coming in, it doesn't feel like that anymore, and it's not really being treated like that anymore. And there's really no one with authority that we can go to for help in that circumstance. Like my mom was explaining last year when she was asking the police for help when, my life was being put in danger, when they were felling large trees at me when I was 50 feet up in another tree. They didn't help her. They didn't help me. They arrested her and then put charges on me later. We don't know who we can ask for help in that kind of circumstance, except for, people in the community and other folks who care about these issues and realize that these companies are not right in what they're doing, and it is not okay to use military counterterrorism tactics against regular people who just want to protect their home and protect their drinking water. So it's gotten pretty intense. We never really knew what to expect from all this, but we're learning a lot about the lengths that these corporations are willing to go to get their way and make their money.
Wow.
I have not been jailed. I have been criminally charged. They put charges on me last year for being in this tree, where it seems really ridiculous. It's like I was explaining. It's like my family has owned this property. We still own this property. Us being in that part of the property, even in the trees if we wanted, was never a crime in like the 32 years previously. And then all of a sudden, just because Energy Transfer Partners wants to think that they own it, even though they don't, we're being sort of made into criminals for doing things that aren't actually crimes. Like no law has changed to say like you can't climb a tree on your own property, or you can't like be standing on your own property, yet we're being arrested for doing just that.
That's
What Pennsylvania really needs from the people of Scotland is solidarity. And I'm paying attention to what's going on over there, and I see, thousands and thousands of people coming out against fracking. And, they're looking at Pennsylvania and seeing, the harm that's already been done here. And that harm is, continuing to happen. And so I would hope that people can look beyond just banning fracking in Scotland and look to those imports coming in, because right now there's a lot of companies that are wanting to import U.S. shale gas. And what we're dealing with is actually a byproduct of fracking. NGLs, natural gas liquids, are simply a byproduct. And now they're being bought up by the plastics industry, by INEOS, namely. And so, continue the fight against fracking there, but realize that these things are still on their way to you on these INEOS ships, and we could really use support trying to stop that from happening,
Got it.
so that those imports need to be directly confronted. We're out here on the front lines directly confronting them and trying to prevent them from shipping them, but we're really up against it here in the US. Like, we don't have, I think, the same kind of popular sentiments that folks have over in Europe. And there's a lot of misinformation that unfortunately people believe about the fossil fuel industry. And so I think that it's really important that we can, have people with another perspective who live in another place, bring that into this fight.